Liz Miele, what's up? How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I know you're in Brooklyn, New York, so how's the whole quarantine situation over there?
Um, I don't know. Like there's a part of me that feels like I'm in a weird bubble. I feel like half of New York is like this is the craziest thing that's ever happened, and the other half is like the lines for the grocery store are long, aren't they? Like it's just like this kind of because I've been fortunate that I haven't gotten sick and nobody close to me has gotten sick. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't spent time in a hospital, near a hospital, and I think that's really where the kind of the front lines and the chaos are or were when we were kind of ramping up and things were getting worse. Um, Really, I mean, it just feels um, mostly weird. It doesn't like I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
like I don't I things are bad and
Yeah.
we are the epicenter or we were up until it started really spreading everywhere. um but it's mostly just I don't know, it just feels like I'm getting ready to go to summer camp, but my dad keeps forgetting to pick me up. Like I just like every day I'm like, can I go back to work? Oh no, things are still bad. What about today? No, he's not going to pick me. Like I wake up every morning being like I have things to do, but it's really hard to really force myself to get them done today
Mm-hmm.
because every day they extend how long the lockdown is, especially for New York, for good reasons. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm, I'm not a non-believer, but, um, but there is a part of me that's like, I don't know. There is a disconnect because I'm not a nurse or I don't have anybody sick in my family that I don't see anything bad happening. Yet my reminder is I go outside and everybody's wearing a mask, or I wait
Mm-hmm.
45 minutes for groceries. Um, or the fact that like an Amazon package comes and it's the highlight of my
Yeah.
day. Like I truly feel like dude, the buzzer rings and me and my two roommates run for the door just
Mm-hmm.
for like a new face and something to do. Like it's almost insane. And like I said, I am busy, but like I have no motivation to get shit done. But like a package, I mean, my vitamins came and I was like, vitamins! And I was like,
Yeah.
so it's just a little, it feels surreal here. And like, I try to make myself either run or go for a walk every day.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find the strangest is like, you look at the window, you're like, oh, what a pretty day. And then you go out and you're like, oh, I feel like I'm in history right now.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's so weird to wake up every morning and be like, oh, this is going to be talked about. Every aspect of this
Yeah.
is going to be talked about. People, you know, my nieces and nephews are going to ask us like, how was it? And I'm going to be like, I don't know. I don't even know how I felt during it. Like what I do feel fortunate about, I was never like a diary person, but I do
Mm-hmm.
write jokes. So I've written jokes since literally day one of kind of the lockdown and things happening. So I do have like my emotions in some sense. And I've done like a bunch of podcasts. So I guess on every podcast like this, I'm just like, I don't know how I feel. Um, but I guess this will probably be one of the most well documented pandemics. I don't think there's a lot of podcasts from 1918
Yeah.
or 1912 or whenever things sucked before.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's it's weird. I've been on the subway twice in 2 months, and that used to be like an everyday thing. I haven't been to Manhattan in over 2 months, which also that's where I would go to work. So again, it's like weird.
When you're going outside and like you said you're running or exercising, are you wearing a mask? Like are you covered up?
I can't breathe. So the rule, especially in New York City, is that if you're not social distancing, you have to wear a mask. So that's
Mm-hmm.
usually when you're in close proximity to somebody or like inside, a grocery store or whatever. So I usually have a bandana around my neck, and if I'm
Mm-hmm.
running, clearly I try to keep a distance from people. I'm usually not around people when I'm running.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I stop to walk or if I go in somewhere, I put my bandana up.
Hmm.
That's how I've been handling it. There are people judging you for not wearing a mask while running, but like I'm not I'm not near anybody. I just think that's a little not ridiculous because again, we're still learning
Yeah.
every day more and more about the virus. So I don't want to say it's ridiculous, but I just I don't know. A part of me feels like if I'm social distancing, it should be fine. I just, as soon as I stop or I go anywhere, I try to put a mask on.
One thing that I find strange is when I see people in their cars wearing masks. And I mean, they're by themselves, so I don't. And having a mask on, you have trouble breathing. So
Yeah.
when they're wearing masks while in their car, and I like to keep my windows open. I like to cruise a lot here in South Florida, so I
Yeah.
keep my windows open. I don't have a mask, but I see people with masks on, and I feel like I'm the weird one that I don't. I wear a mask if I go out and like do grocery shopping or something like that. I haven't gone to the beach yet. I'm afraid to go there. But yeah, that it's weird times.
Well, at first I thought it was weird here, but half of them or some of them are Uber drivers or Lyft drivers. So
Mm-hmm.
they're having strange people in their car. So I think that makes sense to me. And you can
Yeah.
only, if you, it's like some people are having like that kind of plastic, like saran wrap, in between the front seat and the back seat to kind of give a barrier.
Yeah.
So I kind of get if you're having strangers in your car, some of it might just be convenience and the fact that like you have to be really careful taking off your mask because you're not really supposed to touch the front of it.
Hmm.
And then let's say you know corona gets on the front of your mask, you're
Yeah.
supposed to take it behind the ears, but then if you put it down you have to be careful about how you pick it back up because you can you know infect yourself or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of it is just once the mask is on I don't have to worry about like doing anything stupid, which I kind
Mm-hmm.
of get. But I do agree. It's like, especially as it gets warmer, it's getting more difficult to breathe.
You've had a lot of gigs booked abroad, which I believe you booked yourself. So were you needing to reschedule them since the whole pandemic?
I don't really know how to reschedule stuff overseas right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I was in the middle of a European tour. I had done Paris and London, and I was getting ready to go to Berlin and Stockholm and then Switzerland, so like Geneva and Zurich. And it was starting to become clear I wasn't going to make it to Switzerland because they were already shutting down. But I was like, I think I'll make it to Berlin in Stockholm. And then I woke up and there was like travel ban, everything shut down. Like it was like my friend booked me a flight home in the middle of the night because she was like
Mm-hmm.
freaked out that I was going to get stuck there. Very grateful for her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I had to cancel everything. Berlin was going to be my first time there. So it was sold out show. I was like super,
Mm-hmm.
really, really excited about it. I was going to see my babysitter from when I was like 10.
Oh wow.
And I hadn't seen her in, forever. So I was super bummed. The thing is that like all my
Mm-hmm.
US gigs, like, so I was booked all throughout April and May, and I rebooked all that stuff for the summer, thinking like they said 8 weeks, and
Yeah.
clearly nobody knew anything about it. And now I'm gonna have to reschedule everything that I booked in July
Oh
and,
man.
and August because at the very earliest things are gonna open up in September. But comedians are not only non-essential, but we're um high risk. So we're not essential. Nobody really needs us. And
Yeah.
then also the way we perform, which is in groups of people in basements close together, we're high risk. So I really don't know how much comedy is going to happen until the fall. And even if it happens, it might not even happen in the fall. So like, I feel bad, but I'm going to have to like reschedule again. And then for Europe, honestly, I knew right away not to touch Europe because
Mm-hmm.
if things are travel kind of just started to shut down pretty quickly, and I'm scared of just even state travel. Like we are handling this so disjointed and so irregular from state to state that like how is this not going to be a problem, especially in the United States, for a
Yeah.
long time? Because we can handle it in New York City, but if Florida doesn't do shit, all it takes is one Florida person to come to New
Yeah.
York and start things over. Or somebody from New York that, maybe they're the last person to get corona
Yeah.
goes to Florida. Like we don't have, I don't know if they're going to start implementing taking temperatures or testing people when they fly. I don't know, but we're not even testing people in their own states, as opposed to you look at Korea or Germany or some of these other countries that have really started to like test and take care of it and track it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part of me that's like, who wants us? Like, first of all,
Yeah.
who wants to come to New York City after being the epicenter?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I do think there's some benefits to us being screwed because if if having it really does give you the antibodies and kind of makes you resilient, then
Mm-hmm.
we'll be kind of healed a little bit faster than other people. But again, they don't know if that's true yet.
Yeah.
And then just in general, you know, it used to be New York City comedian Liz Miele, like she's coming to you, but
Mm-hmm.
now it almost feels like a threat, like New York
Yeah.
City comedian, like who's gonna come? Like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the problem. So I don't know if anybody's gonna want us, New Yorkers, let alone Americans, for a
Yeah.
long time. I mean, I think we handled this so horribly that I think going to America, especially New York, is going to be high risk for a while, or at least in people's minds. Like they might discover stuff in the next 3 to 6 months where they know a little bit more about it. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
not airborne. It's if you do this, or,
Yeah.
like I do think we're going to learn as things go along, and the benefits of other countries having it before us. We're learning from them. But until then, everybody is a little bit like, stay away.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I know a lot of comedians are doing like Instagram lives or doing like they're still doing stand up but just doing stand up through virtual like through I don't know YouTube live and all that stuff. So are you doing stuff like that as well?
yeah, I almost immediately started getting asked to do corporate gigs via
Hmm.
Zoom. And I was like, yeah, I don't have a job.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take the money. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun.
Mm.
Even so, like, there's two ways of kind of handling these things. There's it when everybody's mute and you hear nobody. So there's no interruptions, but there's
Yeah.
also no laughter. And
Hmm.
that just feels like no matter how good it goes, you're bombing.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't feel good. It's not what I want. And then the alternative is that like everybody's unmute, or maybe just like a select 10 are unmute.
Hmm.
And that has its problems because laughter is usually kind of spread out.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's like concentrated in your ears and everybody's disjointed. So like you laugh and then that person laughs and then somebody's like vacuum cleaning for no reason. Like it's just it just feels like a bunch of waitresses dropping like glasses while you're trying to talk.
Yeah.
Like it's just really distracting. It really throws off your timing. It feels slightly better than everybody being muted, but then it's also more challenging. So there's benefits. It's something, and
Yeah.
I've been doing at least a couple of shows in some form, whether it's a Zoom show or Instagram Live or what have you, every week. But it's hard and it's
Yeah.
not fully rewarding. I
Mm.
also okay, if I do a joke that's already polished, like I know it works, I've done it in front of audiences, and I do it as a Zoom show, it just feels like I lose confidence in it and it doesn't
Mm.
feel as good, as opposed to what I've been trying to do more and more is write new jokes, work on new stuff, and do that for the audiences. And then I don't know what's supposed to be funny. And then I don't feel like I'm missing out on the laughs because I've never performed it live. I don't know what it would feel like to get a laugh from this joke.
Hmm.
So I've been kind of trying to do as much new material as I can, both to like grow and write and come out of this, you know, comedy break with new material, but also just because it's the to me it's the best way to handle these Zoom shows as opposed to just performing old jokes from an old life. Like it
Hmm.
almost feels like, how is that even relatable anymore? I'm talking about going to weddings and people are canceling their weddings. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Nobody's going, like, I'm literally complaining about like, oh, I went to 7 weddings and everybody's like, I would love to leave the house. Like, I would love to have a reason to do something. And it's like, you can't even complain about the thing nobody wanted to go to before. So, I'm adapting. I think we have to
Hmm.
adapt. And I think the entertainment industry is going to be jobless a lot longer because we're truly non-essential and we're a luxury item. So I think it's to my benefit to adapt and make the best of it. And it's going to be my life for a while. And I don't want to be twiddling my thumbs and left behind, but also uh, have taken a weird year off from growing because I didn't want to do the alternate version of my craft.
Hmm. Thing about Zoom calls, I mean, I definitely see an issue with that, and there's always that one person who doesn't know that their mic is muted and always having some background noise, or they're talking to someone or playing music out loud or maybe chewing. And yeah, I can see how that can throw you off your
and
game.
it's not somebody in the back of the room chewing. It's a dude chewing in your ear
Yeah.
and whispering to his cat, and you're just like, how are you,
Yeah.
like, because people are technically alone in their room or their
Yeah.
house, and they're acting like they're alone in their room in their house, and they're just so, I feel like everybody should have like a big, like, you're unmuted, the same way that, like, when a, like, a TV show's like, it's live,
Yeah, yeah.
it's going, like, I think everybody should be like, you're unmuted, everyone can see that you're standing up and your
Yeah.
crotch is in the shot. Like, it just feels, I feel like everybody is so like it. And don't get me wrong, the first time I used Zoom is during this lockdown. I've never
Mhm.
used it before. I had to learn everything as I go. I'm now
Mhm.
putting on Zoom shows myself. Like, every day I'm figuring stuff out, and I have great empathy for the technologically slow, because that's definitely who I am,
Yeah.
and having to learn things in the moment. But at the same time, like, basics, mute video,
Mhm.
on, off, like, don't be giving your life away by accident. This is, I don't know.
Well, you talked about traveling, and one thing I've thought was pretty awesome about you is that you do a lot of traveling outside the country for your stand-up. So I'm curious, I mean, you've mentioned like awesome places like Paris. What's your favorite spot that you've performed outside the US?
If it's just with performing, like, audiences, I would
Mm-hmm.
say Glasgow was probably one of the best audiences I've ever had. Sydney, Australia was one of the best audiences I've ever had. And then I go to London at least once or twice a year, except for this year, because it's some of the best audiences I've ever had. So those are like my top, for like just purely based on people that get my dark,
Mm.
fucked up sense of humor. Like, that's, to me, those are like, I don't know, kindred spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Then for just traveling, like, oh man, I loved Japan. Japan is
Mm.
one of the coolest places, and I want to go back. I love Thailand, again, one of the coolest places, and I want to go back. Netherlands is everywhere in the Netherlands. I've performed in like 5 cities now in the Netherlands. It's the
Hmm.
prettiest place I've ever been, and I want to go back. So there's places that, like, I I try to add at least one new country a year. I technically snuck it in for this year because
Mm-hmm.
I had never been to France and I'd never been to Paris. Um, but I don't know. I try to go to places that, like, I've performed in Pakistan. Like, I've performed in places people would never. And like, some of them are military tours, but Pakistan was an independent tour for Pakistani people. Awesome shows, incredible
Mm.
country. Like, to me, I want to go to places that kind of challenge me as an American, challenge
Mm.
me as a comedian. Um, they might not be the best shows. They might be bad shows, but great experiences. Like, I'm trying to think, I have a joke called Fuck Finland, which is about trying to get into Finland.
Yeah.
That, if it's so funny because I'll get hate comments, but you can tell they just read the title.
Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, it's a joke. Like,
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
says fuck Finland. Everybody says fuck America. That's why the title itself, in my mind, is hilarious because
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Nobody says fuck Finland. And
Yeah.
then I even put a subtitle just so people understood, like, this is technically a joke about organization
Yeah.
and shitty airport experiences. It's almost not about Finland.
Mm-hmm.
Finland just happened to be the country that wasn't letting me in because of my passport. So to me, like, and I did a festival. I ended up getting there. I missed one show because of my passport issues, but it was fun. They were nice, but like, it wasn't rewarding shows. Like, Finland is such a reserved country that, it felt like a Zoom show. Like, they would be like, and then they would come up to me afterwards and they'd be like, that was amazing. And I'm like, tell your face. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was the longest hour of my life. So there's certain countries that just, like, I don't know, Glasgow, like, I was telling like suicide jokes in Glasgow and they were like, I was having applause breaks and I was
Oh man.
like, most people stare at me like, this is amazing. Or like, I did a suicide joke in Norway like 4 years ago and I got
Mm-hmm.
an applause break, and like, they have like the highest rate of suicide. So it
Mm-hmm.
was a risk,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I like dark sense of, I'm a sad, I tell funny sad jokes. Like that's what I do for a living. I've had people that were like, this is sad and not comedy, and I was like, they're not wrong. And then I have people that watch it and they're like, I've been waiting for somebody to make jokes about this topic specifically.
Mm.
So I know I'm not for everybody and I don't take it personally, but
Mm-hmm.
when I do click, I get very excited. And so even how I got to London and even started touring internationally is I worked at Caroline's, which is it's right in Times Square in New York
Mm-hmm.
City. And it was one of the first clubs to work me all the time. I was really young. I was like 19, probably like 19, 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing fine. Like I got laughs, but you know, I wasn't like the best. I'm still
Yeah.
not the best. But like, so it was always English people, because it's very touristy, that would come up
Mm.
to me and be like, you're amazing. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, nobody feels that way.
Yeah.
Maybe I belong in England. And it started to make me think that like maybe my people aren't here. Like
Mm.
even now, like I do way better in London than I've ever done in California.
Oh wow.
Like it's just I'm very like East Coast, New York, New Jersey, go fuck yourself. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is a problem. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I had somebody watch that fuck Finland joke and call me a Karen. They were like, oh, what a Karen. And like it was kind of funny because I was just like, I get the slur or the
Yeah.
you know the tag of like privileged white lady, and you know I would never deny that I don't have privileges or that I'm a white lady.
Yeah.
But in that thing, I was like, this is a pretty universal problem that I'm just making a joke about. Like that's what I find so funny, is that you're gonna find people like that joke kind of on one coast is like, you're too high strung, and then on this coast they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
that is crazy. So it's like you kind of find like, even, you know, the United States is so big that there's parts of this country that just get me, and then there's parts that I'll never go back to. West Virginia, I'm sorry, West Virginia, we're not friends. Like I've bombed in your state so many times that I'm done trying. Like that's just how it is. Maybe somebody from West Virginia might like me, but the
Yeah.
state of West Virginia has made me cry too many times for me to go back. We're not friends. So that's kind of how I feel, is that I'm just kind of trying to find my people. And I think there's some coasts and states and countries that get my anxiety and sadness and craziness a little bit more, and my perspective and my yelliness. Like that's all I'm just trying to find somebody that likes when I yell.
Well, you mentioned you like to go places where to get challenged. So what's one location that you feel like that would be really challenging for you, but you really want to go there and try out, whether it's in the US or outside the country?
I've been trying to go to South Africa for years. It's their whatever their currency is, it's just not very strong, so you don't get paid a lot. So I would have to have a bigger fan base. I have like I think from my knowledge, I have like 10 fans there, which is not enough to make money. But I've been trying to go to South Africa for like 10 years. Like I really want to go. I've read a lot about it. I have comic friends that grew up there, that started there. I think that would just be amazing, and it would be so different and interesting for me. And I don't know. I think because I read so much about it since I was a teenager, that I've been to Africa once because I've been to Egypt, but that it feels like Egypt is so different from South Africa, just placement wise, but just culturally, that I don't know. I would want to explore Africa more. And then I actually have a lot of fans in India, and I get messages every week from India. And so I want to go. I mean, again, everything's become more challenging, but I want to figure out a way to go to India, and at least one or two cities. And I don't know. I think it would be hard. Like Pakistan was hard because I don't think I ever experienced such a disparity in wealth and poverty. I don't think I've ever seen people like truly begging on the street for what is the equivalent of like an eighth of a penny. And then to perform at these shows, which I'm clearly performing for the upper class, and like I have there's armed guards outside, there's armed guards during the show. Like it's like it was just kind of a mind fuck in a lot of ways, for me to be a person and then also know that like I have no real understanding of why life is like this and how to bring it in. And it felt really hard, but I think it's important to feel that uncomfortableness, because then you know about it and you can do something about it. So there's a part of me that just wants to experience as much of life so that I have a real understanding of it and I can appreciate what I have, but I can also help the people that don't have and expose the people that don't have. Because I think there's also a lot of people going around being like, it's fine, everything's fine, when
Yeah.
there's so much poverty in the US and there's so much poverty around the world, and you can just do even just a little bit to change somebody's life. And so even like when I went to Pakistan, people were like, don't go. And I'm like, why? And they're like, you could get hurt. I could get hurt. I could get hurt leaving the
Yeah.
house. Like,
Yeah.
that's like the craziest thing about like traveling and traveling places. It's all a risk. You know, I toured in Turkey. There was a bus bombing in Istanbul the day we landed. And then it was for a military tour. So like everything, all the fun stuff we were supposed to do got canceled. And, you know, it was scary, but it was also probably the coolest place I've ever been. I want to go
Yeah.
back to Turkey. I think about Turkey most days. It was the coolest place and everybody was so nice and the food was awesome. And I discovered my favorite dessert, which is kanafa, which everybody should try. And they now have a Trader Joe's version, which is
Oh,
probably the
nice.
whitest thing I've ever said. But when you can't get it fresh, the Trader Joe's version is pretty good. But yeah, I just I don't know. I want to learn new things. I want to experience stuff, and I want to find my people. And I've learned very quickly that my people aren't closest to me.
Yeah, yeah. I would definitely see you doing awesome in India. I love that culture. When I lived in the Pacific Islands a bit, I kind of was exploring that culture. I don't watch it anymore, but like Bollywood movies, I kind of had like a phase of going through a lot of Bollywood movies. They're long I don't know if you've ever seen one. They're like 3, 4 hours long. They're so long that you have to take a break. Like after maybe 2 hours of watching it, like everyone has to take a break because it's so long.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I can see you actually doing pretty awesome in India.
Yeah, it's just been even nice, like here, like I've had Indian fans that happen to be in the US and they come out to like a show when I'm here. I've had them send me messages. Like there's a part of me that's like, that makes me feel, I guess special is the right word, where I just feel special that like I've had such a different experience than somebody across the world, but they relate to me and I speak
Mm-hmm.
to them in a way that makes them feel seen, and that I don't know why, but it makes me excited. Like it makes me feel like the difficult experiences I've had throughout my years was for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can make somebody across the world feel less alone and feel seen, that it's kind of all worth it. And then the bonus is that I get to see a part of the world that, I mean, my parents, I brought my mom to London like 2 years ago as a gift, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I don't know if my dad's ever left the country. I think that was the first time my mom's left the country. It's the first time my sister left the country because she came with us. Like, you know, my mom's in her 60s now, and that was the first time she left the country. That was the first time. And like, you know, I told her it was a starter country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They speak English. They're very pale. Like, you know what I mean? I was just
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you don't have to, like, their accents can be difficult at times, but
yeah,
like London is not too different from New York. Just
yeah,
everybody's like, hello. Like,
yeah.
you know, it's so, you know, I would like to take my mom places. I would like to take my sisters places. I, I don't know. It's a luxury, and I don't know if I would have been able to do it or afford it or have the time to do it if I didn't have this career that involved it and it was involved in it. And I'm just really grateful, and I want to help people experience it as much as possible.
I want to start talking about your podcast. Because of the pandemic, you recently started the podcast called Two Non-Doctors with Maria Shahada. So how did that come about?
So it's a little bit of, it's like an inside joke. Like Maria Shahada is my best friend. I've known her since I was 21, I think. We've been a long distance friendship for most of our friendship. So we met in New York. She was there for like maybe 2 or 3 years. Then she moved to LA for 8 years, and now she's in London. So she's been in London for a couple of years. And she would come stay with me, especially because she was getting these year-long visas in London. So
Mm-hmm.
she would have to, when she would come back to renew her visa, she'd have to be in the US. So she would come stay with me, and it would be open-ended. She'd be like, it could take a couple of weeks. It could take a couple of months. So, and then even when I would go to visit her in LA, or like if I was touring somewhere, like she always stays with me. I always stay with her. We've become very close, but we bicker like a married couple or siblings. Like
Mm-hmm.
we spend so much time together. We know each other, and there's just like, it's that type of bickering where you don't need to express love because it's
Hmm.
already there. So you can just go for the jugular. Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
the fuck are you doing? Like, so she showed me that she had like a rash on her arm. And I was like, dude, that doesn't look good. I was like, I
Hmm.
think we should go to the doctor. She's like, I'm not going to the doctor. I was like, dude, as a non-doctor,
Yeah.
I think we should see somebody that knows something. And she was like pushing against me, and I was really concerned. So I was like, my parents are veterinarians. So I was like, well, at least let's talk to my mom. So I showed a picture
Hmm.
to my mom, and my mom's like, she should see a doctor. I was like, you have a non-doctor and a doctor saying that
Yeah.
you should see a real doctor. So she was like, well, as a non-doctor, as somebody that it's their arm, like, so we have these fights where like
Hmm.
we're very extreme. We're very dumb know-it-alls. Like, we are aware that we don't have all the information, but we're too stubborn to like back down. And it
Hmm.
was just like this kind of dynamic we had between each other, but we're researchers. So like, she has
Yeah.
misophonia, which is, it kind of translates to the hatred of sound, but it's like when people have a very extreme response, like a response that doesn't even make sense to very minor sounds. So like gum chewing sets her off, pen clicking,
Mm.
tapping, she'll go crazy. So I've known her forever and I've adapted. I don't chew gum around her or whatever.
Hmm.
But I remember like maybe 6, 7 years ago reading an article and going, oh, I think this is what she had. She was just like, hey, I'm
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
weird. And I was like, you are weird. And then I found that it was a disorder. And I remember showing it to her and she's like, oh my God. And it like
Yeah, yeah.
changed her life. She's like, she felt less like a freak. She was like, oh my God, this is a thing. This isn't my fault. I'm not crazy. And so she has jokes. She's a stand-up as well. She has jokes about it. And so when we decided to do this podcast, her first thought is like, I want more people to know about misophonia,
Hmm.
for that relief, but also so it can be a thing that you don't have to explain. The same way that like, I suffer from depression. I'm dyslexic. I don't really have to explain if I tell somebody I'm dyslexic. I don't really have to explain what depression is. Even if
Hmm.
you've never experienced it, it's in the zeitgeist, and most
Yeah.
people have a basic understanding of it. Just like OCD, most people have a basic understanding. Even if it's a flawed understanding, it's
Hmm.
still like you kind of get it.
Yeah.
So when I was staying with her in London, when things changed and I had to leave, and so we both quickly kind of understood that we weren't going to be stand-ups for a while. And I was like, we decided like 2 days before I was leaving, like, I think we should start this.
Hmm.
2 days after I got home, we recorded our first episode, and 2 weeks into the pandemic, we released the first three. So I've been really grateful for it. It's me staying connected with my friend. It's us um, kind of being honest about who we are as people. And
Hmm.
I think who doesn't Google every day something weird? Like, you're like, what is this? Or
Yeah,
why is
yeah.
this happening? Or why is my ear ring just on the left at
Yeah.
noon? Like, just like this, like, we're researchers and we're curious and we're silly. And so it's just a silly podcast about two women that are like trying to figure it out. And we've had a really good response from it. Honestly, I joked when I released the podcast, I was like, I'm sorry to inform everybody. With great regret, I am starting a podcast. Like, I am truly the last nobody needs it. There's a million of them. Every single comic has one. I was really fighting it off, but there is now another one that nobody needs. But people have been really sweet, and our fans have been really thoughtful, and it's been fun. I mean, it's honestly been a savior during this time where I would do anything to go on stage and I don't have that option. And it's just nice to be silly.
No, I like it. It's informative. It's actually educational. I like that you all, I guess, do a Google search on a topic that you're interested first, and then you talk later on about like one certain topic. It's not like everyone has access to a doctor on the phone or like a family member that's a doctor, like, hey, what's this? I mean, I've been in situations where I'll have like, I don't know, like a weird rash, like a kind of like little infection or something. And immediately my mind goes to like I have cancer or
Yeah,
like
of
I'm
course.
dying or something like that. And this is like me being like 21 or 22 and like, oh man, like I'm dying. Let me like start telling my family like about
Yeah.
and then I'll finally go to, and there's like no one I really know, or maybe I'm like too afraid to tell someone like, hey, have you ever experienced this before or something? But yeah, like it's very helpful because like there's a couple of episodes I'm like, okay, that's very educational. I'm glad to know that.
Oh yeah, and like even in our own Google searches, I was like, didn't know that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, and there, I also what I'm starting to realize, and I think I kind of got it with my stand up, but this has been really interesting. Where like you say, like I have eczema. I've been able to control it a little bit, but I still have like flare ups. But I kind of talked about my eczema. Maria talked about her psoriasis. And you'll have people that have like different, like, hey, this is what I discovered. And you're like, so now we start like a little community where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, I will try that. Or, hey, I took this out of my diet and it changed my life. Um, but even just somebody being like, oh, I thought that was just normal. And now I realize that this is something that I could take care of. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like, so like a good example, just friendship wise, is one of my close friends, Adrienne. She's grew up in the Bronx. So that made me think of you. Um,
Yeah.
but she I always had really dry hands in the winter. My hands would crack, they would be really dry, they would bleed. Like there was nothing I could do to stop it. And when I switched to SLS free soap,
Mm-hmm.
sodium lauryl sulfate soap, when I only used soaps that took that out, which is basically the thing that makes it suds, it changed my life. My hands are
Hmm.
almost never dry. The only time they start to get dry is if I'm driving and I go to rest stops and I use like cheap like rest stop bathroom soap.
Mm-hmm.
Within like 2 stops, my hands are dry again. So SLS, there's a ton of things that I could say about it, but especially if you have sensitive skin, it really dries out your skin and it takes that layer of oils off your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So I told her, I was like, dude, like I could see it. It's not even winter. And I could see her hands. And I was like, dude, you gotta change your soap. I literally bought it for her. I was like, use this soap. And she said within 2 days, her hands started to heal. Because she
Hmm.
was like putting it in lotion and trying to, I was like, no, you gotta start with the thing that's tearing it apart. Don't use any soap that has SLS. Even I started trying to like bring like a little like travel size thing with me, because even just using it at a public restroom a couple of times starts to destroy my hands. Like they're that sensitive. So especially now with hand washing, everywhere in my apartment has SLS free soap. Like I won't even let my roommates get, I was like, I will pay the extra $2 for our fancy soap. Like, but it was a game changer. And I think
Mm-hmm.
just those little facts kind of, you think it's just normal. Yeah, it's the winter, my hands crack. Not
Mm-hmm.
for everybody. That is not, you don't have to live that hand cracking life.
Yeah.
Like, fucking get yourself some SLS free soap. And that's
Yeah.
just kind of what we're spreading. It's 90% funny, 10% educational. Please, every episode where we are morons, we are not doctors. And
Mm-hmm.
then the coolest part is I brought my mom on. So my mom's a veterinarian and she's way smarter than me. And we brought her on, and that's been really cool. So my favorite episode we've done so far is my mom is 63 years old and she started competitively powerlifting,
Mm-hmm.
like I think at 61, 60.
Oh wow.
And so she's lifted 303 pounds. She's
Wow.
a hero.
Yeah.
Um, so we brought her on to talk about just weightlifting in general, weightlifting and losing weight in your 60s. She's had 5 kids.
Mm.
What it's like to lose weight post menopause, how hard it is, how
Yeah.
important weightlifting is in general for people, but especially for women. She was starting to get signs of osteoporosis, and once she started powerlifting, all the signs went away,
Oh
because
wow.
weightlifting in general helps bone density
Hmm.
better than all the milk and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it was just, to me, that's such a powerful episode where here's a woman that has struggled with her weight, and my mom's worked 80-hour weeks and had 5 kids, and has always exercised, always taken care of herself, but also has always been exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And she's found weightlifting to be enjoyable for her and probably the healthiest thing she's ever done for her body.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to talk about a couple of albums that you have, which are really funny and really hilarious, which I understand that you help produce yourself. So could you describe that process a little bit, and how were you able to produce that?
Yeah, so I have 2 albums, and then I actually have a special coming out in 2 weeks on YouTube. But there are record labels for comedians. It's honestly not that hard, or at least I have the connections that if I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do it with a record label, I could. But I'm a researcher. The same way that I research my body, I research the
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
and very quickly talking to other comics and doing research, you don't really need a record label if you know what your goals are for the album and who
Mm-hmm.
you want to listen to it and how you want to make money. You don't really need one. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell comics there's advantages to being a part of a record label and there's advantages to not. And I was confident that I could do it without it. So
Mm-hmm.
I set up shows, hired, recording people. And I always do video just for like to make clips online. Hired a video person, put shows together, had an audience, would put would clearly practice my hour and tour my
Yeah.
hour for a couple of years. And then edit it, throw it on a CD. And then there's different websites. I always use CD Baby, but there's different websites that you can self-release where when you publish it, it goes on iTunes, it goes on Amazon, it goes on Spotify, it goes on Pandora. And then, I had the connections to get it on Sirius XM and other things, but I'm fortunate that I had been doing it long enough. My first album came out 10 years into my career, and I felt good. And then my stand-up was good enough, or at least for me. And I was starting to have a fan base that I didn't really need a record label to help me both produce it and get it out. Now doing a special, which is, like I said, it's a couple of microphones and it's a couple of shows, and that's how you make an album. A special was 5 cameras and 2 shows.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad I spent the money before I knew the pandemic was happening, because I clearly wouldn't have had it and I would have been terrified. Now, I kind of wish I had the money, but I am grateful, especially knowing stand-up is dead for a while, that I was able to put this hour that I was really excited about already on tape and release it and give it to people when they're stuck at home and they can't see live shows. But it's, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is doable, and more so doable today than it ever has been. Like Judah Friedlander is a friend of mine, and he did a special where it was all done on iPhones, because you can now, with the newest iPhone, you can record stuff at 4K.
Wow.
Yeah, but even a couple of years ago, your iPhone could do 1080. So there's a lot, like I even say this for young comics or young actors or anybody that wants to make their own stuff. Like, you can do it with a tripod that you buy on Amazon and your iPhone. Like, you can make stuff. Like, you can make a viral video with your phone. Like, the same way that people have gotten notoriety just from social media and just putting some tweets out there or whatever, you can do the same thing now. So it is harder when you're doing an hour of stand-up. It's harder because you need a fan base and you need, audiences and blah, blah, blah. And it was a very difficult experience to put this special together, and it was extremely stressful. And I've now watched my special probably 20 times in the editing process that I hate it. I mean, between the mix of performing it for 2 years and watching it 20 times, I had to make sure there was no glitches when I uploaded it, and I couldn't focus. Like, I've just seen it so many times that I like literally told my sister, I was like, can you watch this and just make sure like my mouth lines up with my, with the video, because I can't watch it anymore. Like, I truly zone out, and I hate myself, and I can't do it. So it takes time, it takes effort, it takes connections, but I also think it takes research and some gumption. And I think everybody can produce their own thing, whatever it is your thing that you want to produce.
No, I definitely feel you on the aligning your lips, I guess, the way your mouth moves to what you're actually saying, because especially if the camera is not, if you're recording what you're saying is not from the camera and it's like from something else, it's, even though like the first maybe like, say it's like a 20-minute video, or the first 10 minutes everything could be aligned, but then for some reason like the next 5 minutes it's no longer aligned.
There's just like weird rendering issues, just stuff that you don't like know about. So it's like I check things so many times that towards the end I was like, I can't check out right now, because that would be unprofessional, but I also can't seem to get myself to focus. So I'm very fortunate that my sister Emily is like, she's like my right hand lady.
Well, you mentioned a special that's going to be released on YouTube. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I recorded it in November in New York. It's I was trying to see if networks were interested. There were some that were, but truly with the pandemic and all spending being on hold, that did not come together. But I really didn't want to wait. I didn't want to wait to release it for a couple of reasons. First of all, I have a captive audience. Everybody is at home. I think this is the best time to release something. As somebody that wants somebody to come see me live, it's heartbreaking because I want to keep growing, and that's my favorite way to perform and have people see me. But at least this is something I'm proud of, and it shows all my older material, because I release clips online most weeks, but it's all from my first 2 albums. I haven't released any jokes that I've been working on for the last 2 years. So I think that was important. And then I'm also scared that some of this stuff isn't going to be relatable as our lives change so dramatically just in 2 months, let alone if this continues till September or even longer. So yeah, I recorded it at Subculture. It's like a really cool theater in New York City. I don't know much else to say about it. It's all it's a lot of anger. It's a lot about me traveling. I talk about Pakistan. I talk about going to Australia for a month. I have a lot of jokes about koalas that I was worried about putting out, because I recorded it in November, and then the fires were in like December that were like killing all the koalas. And I was like, oh, I talk about how much I don't like koalas. And then they all died. And I was like, is this going to be a trigger for people? And now I'm putting out a special talking about traveling and going different places. I was like, oh, my whole special is the trigger for the last like 6 months. Like, I feel like the whole thing should be like trigger warning. I talk about happier times in an angry way. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. The coolest thing, which kind of happened randomly, is a fan in Australia reached out to me and was like, I love your stand-up. I'm a cartoonist. Can I turn something into a cartoon? And I was like, this is my dream. I was like, I've wanted one of my stand-ups to be a cartoon for forever. And then what's funny about it is her style makes me look really tall. So I'm barely 5'1". And the first time she sent me like a piece of it, I was like, oh, I look like I'm 6 feet tall. I was like, this is awesome. I'm a cartoon. I look like I'm like 6 feet tall. I was like, this is awesome. So that'll come out. Actually, I'm going to post that clip, but it'll be out on YouTube, and then the whole thing will be out May 30th. And there's this cool thing with YouTube that you can do premiere parties. So it'll be released May 30th at 8 p.m. And there's like like you watch it with your fans, and like a chat thing comes up, and you can talk to them as it happens. My friend Mark Norman just released his special, and I truly was like, it's happening now. And I caught it in the middle of it, and you can see everybody chatting and quoting the jokes and saying hi, and Mark is like talking back to them. So I'm excited to have that kind of premiere experience with my fans. Like, I think that'll be fun.
So you've have 2 albums out already. Are you planning on a third one anytime soon?
So this special, I ripped the audio, and it'll be an album as well. So it'll be a special you can watch on YouTube, and then you can download the audio as well.
Yeah, that's convenient.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people that like to listen to comedy while they drive or when they're traveling. So I think it's kind of split down the middle, that some people only watch their comedy and some people only listen to their comedy. And then I've already started writing what'll be my 4th album, but the world is kind of on fire right now, so I don't know when that will be.
So one thing that I would say really impressed, or what I really like about you, is your response to hecklers. You mentioned that you're 5'1", and what I don't think people really realize is hecklers come in all shapes and sizes. Whether it's a really big person or a small person, there's hecklers out there. And I kind of like, I've seen I won't say so much, but I've seen a few video postings of you responding to hecklers and good responses. I kind of feel like you should come out with an album just of your response to hecklers. So I'm just curious, so who's the worst heckler that you've ever experienced?
Well, I'll first say this. They are good entertainment when you post them. I hate them for real. Like, I don't like hecklers. I just want to do my material. They ruin the show for everybody. It ruins the flow. Like, my latest heckler video was when I was in London, truly 5 days before everything got serious and I had to get sent home. And people are like, well, she's so lucky. Like, that must have been really fun for the show. No, it wasn't. This guy interrupted me 20 seconds into my set. And I had to deal with it, and everybody was happy about it, but it's so hard to flow back into things. And I was angry. I was genuinely angry. Like, come on, dude, 300 people are here, and you're fucking making this about you. Go fuck yourself. And people were like, well, you asked a question. I was like, I don't have to tell you. All my questions are rhetorical. Like, people have this belief Like, especially when you're a woman, this is my favorite part, is if a guy gets heckled and he puts it on, whether people enjoy it or not, it's like, well, it was a show and he interrupted. But for me,
Yeah.
especially because my joke was about dating, she was like, well, she asked, and
Yeah.
what a selfish bitch. Why is she being such a bitch? And I was like, I'm at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if you interrupted anybody else at work, they would be seen as an asshole. But because I tell jokes for a living and you're too stupid to understand that,
Yeah.
I'm the bad person. Like, that's the kind of stuff that makes me crazy. But like, what did you ask? Like, what was my
Well, what's the worst heckler that you've ever experienced? But I do want to mention about that first 20 seconds. Yeah, come on, dude. Like, first 20 seconds of your opening, like, you don't even let the alcohol kick in yet. Yeah, that's messed up.
But really, he's making it about him, and it's
Yeah.
like that. Like, no, why is nobody saying how selfish of this guy?
Yeah.
Like, all the lights are pointed to me. My voice is
Yeah.
amplified. People paid tickets to see me,
Mm-hmm.
yet this guy interrupts, and everybody's like, "Wow, she was really mean to that
Yeah.
guy." Yeah, that guy is one of 300 people, and nobody paid to see or listen to him.
Yeah.
That's where it gets really frustrating. Is there is like a big, like, and don't get me wrong, like, people enjoyed it and people understood in the moment, but when you put things online, there's this big disconnect between like what I'm saying and the actual situation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where I get angry. But I don't enjoy hecklers even when it is a good moment. Like, I can recognize that it was a good moment and I'll put them online,
Yeah.
but it's, if I never had a heckler again, I would be happy about it. And I don't want to make an album about it because I don't want to encourage it, and I don't want people to know me as somebody that deals with hecklers. I want somebody to know me as somebody that spends months writing jokes and polishing them, and as a funny person that made it. Like, this is how I want to be known. I don't want to be known as a heckler comic. And there are comics that are known as heckler comics, and that's their choice, but it's just not mine. I just don't want that. The same way I make a choice by not having like my tits out, or you know what I mean? Like, if I make a choice that I don't want to be seen as sexy or as a sex symbol, I make the same choice that I don't want to be known as a person that responds to people being crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it's how I want to be seen. Then my worst heckler experience, I mean, I feel like it haunts me every day. I did a college gig for a friend of mine in New Jersey, and this guy just ripped me apart. Like, I was bombing. So first, it wasn't a heckler experience. I was just bombing. Like, nobody enjoyed me. This is probably about 10 years ago now, 9-10 years ago. So I'm bombing, and then some guy in the back is like, "You're ugly." He's like, "You're ugly. Your face is ugly. Your shoes are ugly. Your pants are ugly." Like, literally just starts breaking me apart and just saying that I suck. And it's funny, it didn't bother me, but I really did like my shoes at that point. And I kind of was like, as soon as he hit my shoes, that was the one that hurt me. I was like, these are great shoes. And so I started like roasting him back, and I got the audience. Like, people were like, "Wah!" So like, he was saying all the shitty things about me. I was like, first of all, and I like for 10 minutes, I like tore him apart. But I still had another 15 minutes of my set, and you get paid. Like, if you're supposed to do a half hour, you have to do a half hour. You're not going to be paid. So I like get them back. So they hated me or just didn't enjoy me. Then they were like on my side, and then I had to finish doing material. So I went to do material, and they just went back to hating me again. And I truly remember I got off stage and I was like, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." The guy that I was opening for was a friend of mine. He's like, "You all right?" I was like, "Yeah, totally okay." I was like, "Where's the bathroom?" And then I just like cried in the bathroom until he got off. Then I tried to like make myself better. And then he drove me home, and I had gone through like a really bad breakup, and it had been like a couple of months. And I texted my ex. Like, that's how I got back together with, like, I bombed so hard and had such a bad night that all the vulnerability came in. I always say, like, I always ask people, I was like, "Have you ever bombed so hard you got back together with an ex?" That's how bad it was. Like, it was like somebody made me feel so bad about myself that I was like, I will make a bad decision to make this other bad decision feel less painful. But I think about that one a lot. Like, that's the one where I'm like, I think clearly now I have more experiences and I would have handled it better, but you know, you only have what you have in the moment. And I did the best I could, but even everything about that moment was just sad to me.
Well, so you have a couple of videos of you respond to hecklers, but probably your most popular video that I've seen, which is on YouTube, is a skit of you talking about feminist sex positions. So, which is a hilarious joke for those who have not seen it, and definitely look it up. So, how'd you come up with that joke?
So it honestly, I'm one of five kids. I'm the second oldest of five. And at the time, my little sister now lives in California, but at the time she lived in Brooklyn, not too far from me. And my brother lived with me for a couple of months, and then he ended up living with my sister a couple stops away for a couple of months. And we're all really close. We're the middle kids. We're all really close. And I went over to visit my brother and sister, and I had keys to her place. So I walk into her place, and my brother is like, he's probably one of the funniest people I know, but he's telling one of these like street jokes, like one of these like, and I describe it in the bit, but he's telling one of these like sexual act jokes, like you do this and then this happens and then that
Mm-hmm.
hilarious. But I kind of was like turned off by it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I taught you better. Like you're
Yeah, yeah,
funnier than this. And
yeah.
I taught you better. And he was like 19 at the time. And I found myself not only not thinking it was funny, but like not being disappointed in my brother, but just a little like, why is this bothering me? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember for weeks being like, why am I still thinking about why this makes me angry? And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of just sat with it. And finally I came to the conclusion. I was like, oh, because those like street sex jokes always, they're not, they're just hurting women. Like it's never like sexual for the woman. It's always something that like pranks the woman,
Mm-hmm.
embarrasses the woman,
Mm-hmm.
demoralizes the woman. It's, it just made me sad. I was like, to me, that's not humor. That's literally abuse masked as a joke. Almost like
Mm-hmm.
when you say something where you'd be like, that's your face. And they'll be like, dude, that hurt my feelings. They're like,
Yeah,
no, I'm
yeah,
making a joke. Well, how is it a joke if it hurts me? And
yeah.
like, I get that also people can hear my jokes and be hurt by it, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not pinpointing it exactly at you. And I do think things need to be taken with a grain of salt. So
Mm-hmm.
I get that people can be sensitive, and I also get that people need to be less sensitive. It's a very like weird line to cross.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, all these sexual street jokes were always attacking women. And I thought, well, why, at the very least, I can't change what people think is funny. And I can't tell people that this isn't humor. And by
Mm-hmm.
all means, if that's what you find funny, you do what you want to do. But on the other spectrum of it, then I want to make jokes where women aren't the butt of the joke and women aren't the ones getting hurt in it. So my thought was, okay, if there's these sex jokes that always hurt women, I'm going to come up with feminist sex positions as a way to kind of counteract it. And it took me forever to fix it, because the first half of the joke did okay, but it just felt incomplete, and I gave up on it after about 3 months. And then my brother actually saw it and was like, oh, I like that. And I had one sexual position. He goes, what about this? And he gave me an idea. And I was like, well, if I have two, I have to come up with three.
Yeah, yeah.
And that just kind of sparked it. And it very quickly became my closer. Like I couldn't
Hmm.
follow it. And I remember my buddy Hari Kondabolu. He's brilliant political comic. I opened for him on the road for years. He was like, when you put this online, let me know. He's like, this is going to go viral.
Mm.
And it did. It like very quickly. I wrote to a couple feminist blogs to be like, hey, I think you might like this, not thinking anything of it. And Everyday Feminist, without even telling me, was like, wrote an article about it. It got 200,000 views in like an hour. And
Hmm.
then it just became a life of its own. And now it has almost 2 million views on YouTube. And then I re-released like a subtitled version of it like 2 months ago, and that's starting to kind of build a little traction as well.
Do you use that joke when you're abroad as well? And how's the response by other people?
I did when I was touring with it, but once a joke is on a CD or is released, I don't do it anymore,
Hmm.
especially if it's on the internet and it's viral. Like by the time I recorded that, I was tired of that joke. My thing is, if you don't catch me live in the 2 years I'm creating something and it's already on an album, it's dead to me. I'm
Hmm.
not that person anymore. It's not exciting for me. I'm talking about different stuff. Like the longest I tour with a joke is maybe 2 years. It's not
Mm-hmm.
interesting for me to talk about the past and talk about stuff I've talked, like, I don't ever want to be the Rolling Stones doing their hits from the 60s
Yeah.
in 2020. Like I want to keep growing and keep talking about new ideas, and the world is ever changing. So it's, you look like a weirdo talking about flip phones.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you can't talk about flip phones, then it's even weirder. Like I think the pace of writing is going to have to get even quicker, because, jokes that I was making even 2 months ago don't really apply anymore. So, or they need to be changed in some kind of shift. So to me, I even when people request it, I'm like, it's the best version of it is online. Go watch it.
So early on, I saw that you got a chance to talk with George Carlin early in your career, and he actually gave you some advice. So what did he say that really helped you out?
So just to clarify, when I was so I started stand up when I was 16, but when I was 15 and knew I wanted to do stand up, my dad encouraged me. He was like, if you want to do something, you should reach out to the people that are already doing it to get advice. So I made a list of like 40 comedians that I loved, and like truly like everyone from like George Carlin to I don't know, like Greg Giraldo. I mean, sadly, rest in peace, Greg Giraldo, but you know, was like a no-name comic in if I wrote to him in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So I made this huge list. I found people's addresses. I got their emails. I like fan groups, like whatever it was. And I wrote to all of them. And all
Mm-hmm.
I wrote was like, hey, I'm 15. I want to do stand up. Do you have any advice? And two people got back to me, Judd Apatow. And this is Judd Apatow, pre 40-year-old virgin, pre what he is now. He had
Mm-hmm.
finished Freaks and Geeks, but I think Undeclared might have still been on TV. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I think this is like 2001. So he still had his email on his website. Like that shows you where he
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
And I wrote to him and I was like, I love your stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I want to do stand up. And he got back to me right away. And it was like, you should go to college for writing and
Yeah.
good luck to you. And it was very nice. I've briefly met him since then, but I never was like, hey, I wrote to you when I was 15 and you wrote me back. But he's very nice. I just didn't have the heart to be like, ah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I had I found the address to George Carlin, which turned out to be, he had an office that he would go to every day and write. And
Mm-hmm.
I found his address online and I just wrote him and I was like, hey, I've never done stand up, but I love it and I want to do it. And I'm a fan. And if you have any advice, and my dad taught me to write it like a business letter.
Hmm.
So it was my name, my address, my phone number, my email letter. And then I like signed it. So he had even though I mailed it, he had all my information. And he
Mm-hmm.
called me when I was 15 years old and he was like, hey, is Liz there? And I
Yeah.
was like, and I was the one that picked up the phone. I was like, yeah. And he's like, it's George Carlin. And I was like, what? And
Yeah.
he's like, I got your letter. And I was like,
Oh man.
Jesus. And so he gave me very simple advice because, you know, even now I kind of see that it's hard to give advice to somebody that hasn't done something yet.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, you got to write every day. You got to write as much as possible. And you got to get up on stage. He's like, you can't wait any longer. You got to do it
Mm-hmm.
now. And so he was the one that really encouraged me to like, just fucking do it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, you can write to me anytime. So I would write to him every couple of months. I wrote to him after I did stand up for the first time. I got profiled in the New Yorker and I sent him a copy of it and he called me to say he read it and he really enjoyed it. He gave me free tickets to come see him in New Jersey when I was living in Jersey. I got coffee with him when I was 19 and he showed me his writing process. Like he took out his computer and showed like how he structured stuff. And that had one of the biggest impacts on me
Yeah.
as an organist, because it starts to build up. Like, how do you organize all this material?
Yeah.
He was just, he was one of the most generous people I've ever met. And he was a legend and he didn't know me. And he sent me books. He signed some books for me. Just a kind person that happened to be a legend. And I would say the biggest impact he had on me is how he treated me. Like just the fact that I could do nothing for him. I had no connection to him. I wrote him a letter and he always got back to me. He never made me feel like a burden. He never made me feel like I couldn't do something. He never made me feel like it was impossible. And he just treated me with thoughtful respect that you would treat a peer when I was a teenager. And I would say his comedy clearly had a huge impact on me, but I would say how he treated me has had a rippling effect on me for the rest of my life. Like anytime I get it, and I was raised as a nice person. I always try to help people. I like helping people, but I think like I'm looking at, he right after we talked, he just mailed me a headshot and it says, "Go do it, Liz." George Carlin. And I'm looking at it. Like it's been on my desk
Oh man.
for 18 years. So for me, I always get back to people, even if it's like, I don't know, or I don't have the time, or I'm so sorry, but I do my best to always try to see people, try to get back to people, try to treat people with respect, give the little bit of advice that I can, if I can give, it gets harder and harder, and I don't know how he was able to do that. I don't know if I wish I asked him. I wish I really understood, not even like, there's so many things I asked him comedically, but almost now, being 18 years into my career, having a fan base now, not, he had millions and millions of fans. I have thousands and I'm overwhelmed. And people didn't have access to him the same way I did. Like, I wrote a letter and I was able to talk to him on the phone here and there, like, and he gave me his email, and we would email occasionally towards the end, but people can get in contact with me every which way, in any, like, email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it's incessant, and I'm grateful for it, but I'm overwhelmed by it. And there's a part of me, almost like a father figure, wish I could sit down and be like, how did you do that? How did you make me feel special when I was one of millions? So that's the biggest thing I took away from that. And I just will forever just talk about what a kind, generous person he was, and how I think anybody can make an effort to be like that to people. And I really do my best. I don't always I don't always hit the mark, and it's a little harder being a woman, and it could get scarier as a woman. So I block a lot. I'll tell you that much. I do think I have boundaries, and I don't like people pressing those boundaries or making me uncomfortable. But that being said, I just realized my sports bra has been in the background this whole time. I know this is going to be audio, but I just had an epiphany where I was like, oh, good job, Liz.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, just my sports bra hanging in the back the whole time. Luckily, it's a sports bra, and they're a little bit more like kind of rectangle as opposed to like a bra. I'm like, good work, Liz. There's a picture of Bill Murray that my friend painted, and then a sports bra, just for everybody listening.
Well, I like the Robin Williams photo you got up there.
Oh, those are albums. So I have, those are all albums I collected. I grew up in Princeton, and they have one of the most famous record stores called Princeton Record Exchange. And they had a very small comedy section, but you can see Richard Pryor, Steve Martin, Dick Gregory, Eddie Murphy, George Carlin, Robin Williams, Lenny Bruce. I think that's Monty Python, Carl Reiner, and Mel Brooks. What's funny about it is I just, you can't see it because it's off camera, but I had Bill Cosby, and a couple of years ago when everything was coming out, I was like, oh, he's a monster. Holy shit. And so I took my album and I just taped it over Bill Cosby, because as things were coming out, I was like, as a comedy fan, like, I don't know how to handle this. I was like, so it just you're just like, wow, this is a really talented rapist. Like serial, like, and you don't know how to process, like, we've had our legends and people disappoint us, but I think that has been like a wave. So what's really funny about it is I finally got rid of it. Like with spring cleaning, I threw out 4 Bill Cosby records and 4 Bill Cosby CDs. And I think his book, like I did a full Bill Cosby cleaning, because I could, it's a long debate about, once you learn something about it, can you still listen to their music? Can you still watch their movies? Can you still listen to their stand-up? But that one was like, I watched it enough as a kid, and I don't believe anything he says, and I don't care how funny he is. I was like, I'm out. Like, what a horrific, horrible person.
Yeah. Well, Liz, since you have obviously, and you share with our listeners, such an interesting life, and there's definitely a lot more that I haven't asked that's really interesting about you, I thought I'd ask you this question, which is a recurring segment in this podcast called Name Your Bio. So if you had an autobiography about yourself, what would it be called and why?
Oh, that's so hard. that's you got me on that one. I don't know. There's a part of me that likes what my special is coming out as. So my special is going to be called Self-Help Me. And I think because I honestly am a self-researcher, read a lot of self-help books, and have a lot of addiction to self-help and just that nature. I'm a self-starter, self-awareness. I don't know. There's something about that title that I'm really proud of, that I think both works well with the special that's coming out, but I think for the longevity of my life really applies, which is I've always been a work in progress. I have a lot of work to still do, but I've been able to do a lot on my own, and I am proud of it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Liz, before we wrap, is there anything you want to share with our listeners?
just want to reiterate, my special comes out May 30th. It's premiering at 8 p.m. on my YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/Liz Miele. My weekly podcast is Two Non-Doctors with Maria Shahada. We have 10 episodes out, and the new episodes every Tuesday, and it's fun and vaguely educational. And yeah, if anybody wants to listen to my other two albums, go for it. I believe in you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and they're funny albums. I've listened to it throughout my drives, so they're good albums to listen to if you have like a road trip soon. And definitely listen to Two Non-Doctors. I've learned a lot. I'm always looking for podcasts that will teach me something, or I've learned something, rather more and less than entertaining. I'm always big on education and learning new things. So yeah, thank you for teaching me things about
Yay.
certain topics. But Liz Miele, this has been just a pleasure in talking with you. I really appreciate you sharing some information about yourself, and it was just a delightful conversation to have with you. And I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. But Liz Miele, thank you so much for joining us in Irie Chat, and best of luck on everything.
Yeah, thank you so much.